ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Mr. Peter Vesti Frendrup. Warm welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, and thanks for inviting me to speak here. It's my first time in Poland, and yeah, so far it's not been great, not because of you guys or anyone in Poland, but because of Air Berlin. So I had to stay in Berlin last night, so I literally just got here 1 hour ago. Anyway, I made it just in time, so let's get started. Basically, I am here to talk about level design. For Battlefield specifically, I worked on both single player and multiplayer, so I'm gonna be talking a little bit about both, probably most about single player, but I'll try and sort of talk about everything and get all the way around it. Yeah, this is me. I worked at Eurocom in the UK, Ubisoft in Shanghai with Michal and Anna. I don't know if you know them. And now I work at DICE. I worked there for 2 years. These are the games I worked on. As you can see, right now I work on Battlefront, but today I'm here to talk about Battlefield. So basically, this is kind of like the sort of like main sort of subject of the whole talk. Is basically how developers back in the days always made a game, they finished the game, on to the next game, and then people started playing the game. It's kind of like the end of the road for the developers, sort of like the beginning of the road for the players, which is kind of not really how a lot of games are now, right? We're moving into a place where it's sort of like there's a sort of like a different connection, and we stay on like for instance the multiplayer pack I worked on was obviously a part of that whole sort of live thing. So that's something I will talk about later. Basically, the way I've split up the whole presentation is that first I'm going to talk about single player, multiplayer, sort of like the context for level design in general, which for single player is kind of like the war story structure, how that sort of dictates some things and how it impacts basically the way we do the level design. And for multiplayer, it's very much the game modes that sort of that play a massive role and that we really have to think about. Then I'll go into talk more specifically about some level design stuff, and then I'll go really into detail with a few things specifically for single player. Then second part, talk a little bit about this whole thing of sort of like live and how how we can iterate on the games when they're actually out there and you can get people's feedback and all that kind of stuff. So let's get started. This is a single player map. I was the lead for the single player, but at the very end, one of our guys left, and I was working sort of hands-on in the last couple of months on this specific level, which is called Fall from Grace. I actually worked on this level with a Polish guy called Pavel Novak. Probably some of you guys know him. So I'll come back to this one. So the war story structure, which is sort of like multiplayer in Battlefield, single player in Battlefield 1 is kind of like have these like 5 stories that you can pick. So basically, when you start the game, you'll play this like Storm of Steel up here, which is like a little intro, and then you can basically pick any of the 5 stories and sort of play them in any order. You can be like, I'll play the first of this one, maybe the second one, then this one, and then this one, and then go back to, can jump between them. You have to sort of complete them from the first and then the second and the third. So you can't jump directly to the last one. So basically this structure is really, it's quite a big thing in regards to production and sort of like why we chose to do it. So basically, authenticity is like one of the main things that Battlefield always tries to do to some degree. In this one, we tried to do it quite a lot. And what we basically knew from the get-go was that we wanted to sort of depict the war that was global. It was not just like, it's not just like one war. It's not just like one army that sort of like fought that war. It was kind of like we knew there were so many things we wanted to do. And that was sort of like the reason why we picked this. Like we also obviously the first thing we'd do we just have one person that just basically does everything. That's flying and tank driver and stealthing and action and going everywhere, which would be sort of a little bit extreme and maybe not really fit authenticity so much. Probably no one did any of that. So basically what that means for the gameplay was basically that we wanted to have this like character-driven narrative where we follow different characters. It was we focused a lot more on the characters than on the sort of, why you did stuff. It's not like, oh, we're in this battle and we need to secure this and that. We didn't go so much down that route. It was much more like why the characters did stuff, which obviously allowed us to actually focus on the different kind of people and why they did different things. For gameplay, one of the main pillars was variety and player choice. Variety, obviously, because some of the criticisms for stuff like Battlefield 4 single player, there was kind of like a lot of the same stuff. So that's one of the things that we tried to address. So some of the advantages of having this kind of structure. One of the main ones, and actually like really one of the super great ones, is that you don't have these narrative dependencies between the different stories, which means that, say like you cut something, you change something, whatever, somewhere, there's not really any sort of like impacts. You could basically finish one story and be like, okay, that one's done. That's it. Let's make some more, It's not like also something that people had experienced before. It's like, oh, but if you cut something, it can have like a massive impact on, all the other levels, because then you don't have that beat and you need to put it somewhere else or all that kind of stuff. So it's really nice to have that sort of modular thing, which is also obviously made planning quite easy. It really helped in regards to for the team to understand stuff as well. You just say like, oh, it's a flying episode, the first one. Oh, okay, so it's going to be some intro to flying. Or, it'll be like, it's the tank, and it's the last one in the tank one. Oh, okay, then people would sort of know, rather than saying like, oh, it's the 17th episode, or, have the name that people wouldn't know anyway. So that was quite nice. Also, we had the different themes obviously built in. That we have a tank story, we have a plane story, and then we have some, different kinds of stories. It was sort of like built-in variety almost. So here's like some of the interesting things. So what are the challenges having this kind of structure? Obviously, you would have a lot of starts, and they're not always super fun. It's kind of like in a movie. You can't just watch the first like 10 minutes and say, oh, that was a bad movie, right? It's kind of boring always. Or maybe there's a little bit interesting stuff, but it obviously builds up to something. There's a reason why it's there, but in itself, it's not necessarily the best thing. And for games, you don't want to play that many missions that are there for, in 3 hours it's going to be fun. So obviously that was a thing. The same with sort of tied in with tutorials. What if they skip? Because obviously, if you didn't learn something, if we have like a tutorial for something somewhere and you don't play it, then maybe you don't know it. Pacing, obviously, yeah, you can play all the A's first, or maybe you just take the most difficult one and you can't finish it, and then you get annoyed, or all that kind of stuff. Challenge again. All these things are like definitely potential pitfalls for any sort of player. But in the end, we decided that it's more important that people can pick. I think they'll probably appreciate that more. And then if you pick episode 5 to begin with, maybe you can just, if it's too hard, go back. Also, I think players nowadays are kind of used to a lot of stuff, so I don't think necessarily, they need to be told everything again and again every game. So what about the prologue? And this is kind of an interesting thing because it's obviously like the intro. It's kind of like a play-go, so when it's installing, you can play this thing. And it's the one you actually just get pushed straight into when you boot up the game. Even before multiplayer and stuff like that. And this one basically doesn't have anything of the stuff we kind of wanted to do. There's like no player choice, there's no challenge, there's basically nothing. But it is a really good wrapper around this whole narrative and the whole sort of structure and the whole sort of thing we want to convey with this game, with the different kind of characters. You jump between the characters when you die. You get this kind of tutorial where you don't get told to do too much, but it's more like you switch to another character and that's another class, and you have different abilities, different weapons and stuff like that. You get introduced to the tank. You have all these kind of things. So it's kind of like, okay, just see some stuff in this kind of pretty sort of interesting narrative where you actually see like the name of the guys dying and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of an interesting one, and it's also actually in the playtest during development. This one got really bad reviews. Like all people didn't really like it. All the playtesters, it was always like almost at the bottom every time. but we thought it was good. And after we released it, a lot of people really reacted sort of super well to it and really, really appreciated it. So, sometimes you have sort of like design ideas that are super important, but it's kind of like narrative and just strict sort of level design or design ideas you have as a designer. And that's also one of the big themes, I think, for this game. It's basically that I don't think we did anything super specific like that. One thing was just absolutely amazing. I think what we managed to do is get a good balance between sort of like gameplay and story stuff. And so it's not like super good story, but the gameplay is really boring, or like super good gameplay, but there's no real interesting story. We have a good balance, I think, and I think that's one of the things that people really like. That also some sort of pretty decent gameplay, and there was a pretty decent story, and it kind of worked pretty well. And I think that sort of balance is quite important. So let's talk a little bit about sort of like the level design. So these are sort of like some of the level design direction that I sort of set out, obviously based on talking to the overall vision of the project and all that kind of stuff. Player choice is one of the ones that we really wanted to push the choice and actually have people try and play the game the way they like it. We did not want corridors. We did not want reach objectives very much, and that's obviously going back to some of the previous Battlefields, where it's like it's kind of like just follow this marker through the whole game, and you sort of lose the connection to what you're trying to do, which in turn didn't really make much sense, having the character narratives where you're like, I really need to understand why this player is doing this, and all you're doing is just like go to arbitrary point A, B, C. So it's something I really didn't like, and I didn't want to. I'm gonna go in detail with basically a mission that only has that, but there are exceptions. And obviously corridors are like, it doesn't, there were some really good corridors in Battlefield 4 where it's like really open and it's like a really wide corridor. So we just didn't want those corridors that are like, the ones where when you're gonna hit a trigger and then there's gonna come some guys into the room and then you're gonna start killing them. That kind of weird stuff where you kind of like, you just start thinking like, the level designer he's probably gonna spawn some guys here because there's cover everywhere, that kind of stuff. And to go with this kind of player choice, one of the main things we wanted is like simple logical objectives. You need something that's super simple to convey to the player. It's like, whatever, do something. And so the player's like, okay, that seems simple. But then the sort of like the solution, how can you actually do that thing? That's what has to be complex in regards to the player can do it different ways, right? So it could be stuff like I used this example before, but it's kind of like imagine you have Hitman and it's like kill this guy. Oh, okay, you can do it whatever way you want. But then you have another mission where it's like kill this guy with a sniper rifle when he's in this car and sitting at the back seat and he's stopping in front of a red light, right? Then there's not much choice left. You get told exactly what to do. So the objective should be as simple as possible, and then the player should just have basically a toolbox of stuff to try and achieve that objective. Gameplay variety, as I talked about, and then obviously accessible. It's one of the main things of doing AAA games, I think. It's like literally number one is that it has to be a pretty accessible game. That is the one thing that sort of, it just has to be accessible. Everyone needs to be able to pick it up and play it quite basically just start playing it and not be like, I don't know how to play this game, it's impossible. Two other things that I really, really don't like, and one of them is arbitrary restrictions. And we have many of them, but we try to reduce as many of them as possible. It's stuff like you're leaving the area, which is like essentially it's kind of bad level design in a way. I mean, not always. You can't always, get away with not having them if you don't have walls everywhere. But that kind of stuff, or things like, you can't interact with this thing now because, something. Oh, why? Maybe because if you have lots of mid-level cutscenes, you can't do specific stuff. And that's also why I really didn't want to have that at all. That's a really, really important thing that I think people underestimate a little bit, and I'll explain why. So it's basically like this. This is basically the structure that we try to go with for each sort of chunk, as we call them. Like each of those, like A, B, C, D, one of those parts of a war story. And they're basically just a cinematic to begin with, a cinematic at the end, and then we have this like uninterrupted gameplay in the middle. And the reason for this is obviously the player choice. Actually, if you want choice, you need time. If not, it's not like which door do you want, A or B. If you want some real interesting sort of gameplay choice and get your own sort of experience, you need some time. And since every of these chunks are not super long, we cannot have like, if you literally just add one cutscene here, it's too short time to basically be able to do anything meaningful. And also another thing is you're gonna spend a lot of time building up to that cutscene. Say like you wanna, oh, we're gonna have a cutscene with a car and some guys. Okay, what if I blow up the car? Oh yeah, you can't do that. You know, that's already there. There's so many things that just limit you. And this, one of the main reasons, like a lot of the stuff I talk about is not only about the game, it's also about the level designers. And obviously, when I was the lead for the level designers, I wanted to make sure that they could work as well as possible. And adding stuff in here is horrible. And it's just one of those things that, you know, in AAA games and even companies that are used to doing, you know, oh, let's put a cool little cutscene here or a cool cutscene there. You know, it's kind of easy to fall back into that. It's like, are we missing something cool here? What could it be? A cutscene. You know, and we didn't do that too much, and I'm really happy with that. Oh yeah, I have 2 examples. So yeah, basically breakdown, which is one basically like you just go get 4 things and then you need to go back. That's it. So you start here, get 4 things, so you get 4 things, whatever way you want, and then you come back. In that one, we were supposed to have I was supposed to happen something here in the story because this is good. It's good if it happens right there. And it was kind of this thing where the whole setup would be sort of like really, really impacting on the gameplay because it would be like, but we don't know which one the player takes first, right? Maybe can we ensure somehow that the player takes this one first or last, or you know, then you get into all that kind of stuff where it you know, instead of being creative in your mind when you're trying to do level design or design in general, you're just thinking, how can we get to this point? How can we get to that start point? And it's not really creative, I think, and it's kind of horrible. For over the top, we have one good and one bad example. We have one guy dying quite early, and that whole setup, it kind of works okay, but design-wise, I think it's maybe not the super most interesting thing, and it did funnel the players quite a lot, and we looked at quite a lot of data, and it's maybe not the super most amazing thing. However, the transition to sort of like when you get stuck in the mud towards the end, you can still control it. Guys start crawling up on your tank. And then the cutscene starts sort of more or less seamlessly. I think that one worked really well. It goes into the pigeon and fly the pigeon back. See, that works well. So the transitions are really important. If you can get the transitions working well and sort of, you know, where it feels like you're playing the game, and then, oh, I was playing the game, and the game sort of reacted to that, and then it was a cool cutscene showing what I just did, then it's awesome. But when it's more like, you know, really fake, and you know, it's kind of, you know, it just takes control away from you, then it's horrible. So let's talk about sneaking. This is it's a bit connected to what I talked about earlier. So basically here, we have, this is the level I'm going to go a little bit in depth with, where we have, this is kind of like the sneaking tutorial. However, in the end, it was, you know, was decided that this one should be 1. So basically, if you play 1 first here, it's kind of, it can be a little bit difficult to sneak here. And this one, you do quite a lot of sneaking. And then you come back and you play this one, then this one is probably very easy. So that's obviously one of those things where ideally most people would play this one first because that's where we do the proper tutorial. But, you know, it's player choice, right? Maybe these days people don't need it. So let me just talk a little bit about those two setups. What we had in 2 of those levels. Basically, Fog of War is the one. Basically, after you play a tank first, and then you get stuck in this foggy forest, and you have to do some stealth to help your tank advance, basically, because there's lots of like anti-tank guns set up in the forest, and they're kind of this like special forces to take down tanks, basically. So what we basically had to begin with is like we had a soldier tutorial because this was kind of the first time we were on the ground. We had the tank mechanic back in the days. It was really something else than today. You could control the tank. You could like tell it to go, tell it to stop, which was really cool, I think. But it was a lot at the same time. You know, it's like, oh, this is how you crouch. Oh, this is how you pick up a weapon. Oh, this is how you control the tank. Oh, this is, by the way, how you throw the distraction. And oh, this is how stealth works. This is how they get alerted. You know, it's pretty horrible. It was really cool if you kind of knew all the systems. But as a tutorial, that's kind of a bad starting point. So what we did, which basically took we made the prologue, and that was sort of okay, that's where people learn to use their soldier and all the basic stuff. then we simplified we moved the stealth tutorial to the beginning, or not tutorial, but you know when you learn to stealth. And then we simplified the whole tank mechanic. So basically it's not really anything you interact with anymore. Now it's more like, go do the stuff, and then the tank moves up. And then you just focus on stealthing. Another example, which is from Fall from Grace, the one I'm going to talk about in a second. We had this thing where you basically crash with your friend, and then you need to basically you crash behind enemy lines on the German side, and you basically need to go through the German trenches, no man's land, and to the British trenches with your friend. You need to carry him because he's been injured in the crash. And we had that basically at the start because that sort of makes sense, right? Logically, that made a lot of sense because you crashed together in a plane. However, this was very horrible because it's the same thing. It's like you're learning how to carry your friend, and you're learning that guys have spotted you, and you know how to distract them and take them down, and all that kind of stuff. At the same time as you're learning, you're like, oh, let's go stealth some guys. And it's like, oh, you forgot your friend. You need to take your friend with you. You know, it's kind of like these kind of counterproductive things, and it was some pretty cool the friend mechanic was cool. It was at the beginning it was kind of like a turret. You could put him down, he could like shoot, but he couldn't move. We had ideas of like maybe he can like mark people, or all that kind of stuff. But at the same time as teaching about stealth, it was really bad. So one thing like I basically really pushed for, and I think it's much better this way, which had to basically move the friend mechanic to the end, which basically means we can get this sort of structure where you start, and then you have quite a lot of stuff here where you can actually play, and then it's almost like the end, because this is kind of like you carry the friend, and it's also this guy also got simplified a lot. Now when you carry him, you can't do anything; you just walk with him, and that's it. Which is good for one thing, because that means that now we can really push the character narrative, because now you're walking with him, we can do all these setups that are sort of relevant to you carrying your friend, and he's talking to you. We do this, this kind of like light and shadow gameplay when you get close to your own forces, because they obviously don't know if you're an enemy or not. So I think this is like, again, just a way of simplifying in the name of accessibility. I think that's something that for AAA games, you need to do it, and you just need to have this kind of logical progression of stuff so people don't get overwhelmed. It's one of those things that for us as like maybe more or less hardcore gamers, it's kind of like, it's fine, right? But there's a lot of people that play these games, and a lot of them are not hardcore gamers, so you really, like when we do playtests, some simple things, like even the shipped version of Storm of Steel, which is basically you die and then you play another guy, then you die, then you play another guy. People almost couldn't understand it. I mean, they just didn't understand it or like it. So let me talk about this one. I'll go through it just quickly to give you an overview, and then I will show you some data so we can actually see how real players actually played it. So this is basically the structure. This is from BBC, but basically you're like, we want to start down here. We want to go through sort of the outer trenches, not too many people, the reserve trench, the support trench, and the firing line into no man's land, through no man's land to the British line. Here's a visual walkthrough just to explain. This is kind of the very beginning tutorial. You see a shovel, a guy that's ready to be taken down, and then we have this guy sort of like the next one in line. Then we move forward, where it's like this guy it's kind of like the first guy where you get to sort of like decide how you take down. Well, the other ones you can also as well, but the setup is more like okay, now it's like a big scene of people to sort of get past. Then we got into no man's land, into the German trenches, sneak through there, which also allowed me to do some small cool things, I think, which is kind of, I talked about character narrative, but that also applies to the enemies. I don't think we did it as much as we wanted to, but sometimes you get these kind of cool small things where you really can see that the enemy, that's the thing, this war, it's very difficult, right? Who's good, who's bad, everyone's just in the army fighting each other, right? So basically small things like this guy was an animation, he puts that up and then he gets sniped and he's like super surprised and all that. It's pretty cool. Have some other like, you sneaking through no man's land and you hear some guys talking and it's like, a guy's like writing a fairy tale that he's going to publish when the war's over. Those kind of things that sort of like, humanize the enemies a little bit. It's something that we really wanted to have done more, I think. I definitely would like to, but I think there's some cool examples of that in here. Then we make it into no man's land where we basically find our crashed plane and our friend who's kind of injured, and there's a big sort of like, a big scene in the sort of narrative. And then we basically take him, carry him, and we carry him across. This is what I talked about. This is your line, but they shoot at you anyway until you get close because they can't really see who you are. So you just go in the shadows and you see other guys crawling around, getting shot and all that. Finally, you make it to the British line, and that's the end of this mission. So let's talk about some sort of general concepts for level design, and then I'll go into very, very specific details with some telemetry. So this is the classic. It's the absolutely classic thing that I worked on Splinter Cell in Ubisoft, and it's a classic thing. Okay, when your objective is to basically just get past enemies, okay, what do people do, right? It's kind of like, well, maybe they just go out here. Because here, remember, there's supposed to be trenches in like, I don't know, 100,000 kilometers, right? So the trenches are really long, but we're not going to make a whole game, right? That's so long. So we have basically the challenge and the enemies here, and we kind of need to stop the player, even though it's actually counterintuitive for the player, right? It's like there's enemies. I don't really want to go there. I just want to go wherever they are not. So that's an example. I show you how well I did with that. The next one is sort of like the challenge, right? So if you, for instance, just have it like this one, and it's like, well, okay, I'll just kill this guy and it'll just sneak up here. Oh wow, that's very exciting gameplay. No, it's not probably. So you need to have these kind of places where you kind of have to deal with some sort of challenge. If you can just walk, it's maybe not the most exciting shooter experience. So one of the ways I did it, and this is an example I'll show you in the data as well. I can talk a little bit about it now. But basically, you start here. This is the guy that you saw with the big campfire earlier. He's totally alone. So basically, it's super easy. He just stands with his back to you. However, if you sort of, if you start shooting or this guy sees you, these guys will sort of get, not insta-alerted, but because I put them so far away that they'll be like, oh, what's going on over there? And they'll come and investigate and all that stuff. So anyway, most people will probably kill this guy without anyone seeing him. So then you kill this guy, and then what I would do was I would have these guys. Actually, there's quite a lot of guys. I think there's like 12 or something. But it's really easy. It's like really easy. It's like basically made to not be a challenge. But you have all these guys, like 4 of them or something, starting in the middle, coming in a truck. All the guys jump out, so you can you get a chance to spot them. And then they kind of walk out to the sides, so they're almost like guarding the sides of the map. I really wanted the player to sort of go in here. I want the whole thing I want in this area. I want the player to feel like he's good at stealth, and it's pretty cool to be behind enemy lines and do stealth. And so I basically set it up so as easy as possible, with the exception of these 2 guys, because we still wanted the player to actually use some of the stealth mechanics, such as throwing a distraction. So we had this little challenge here, and I will show you in the screw that one. In the data, because I thought it was fun, since my theme is kind of like, how do people actually play the game? Because it's not like you just make a game and it's like, oh, whatever, that's it. We make it for the players, right? That's at least my reason why I make games, is that I love playing them when I was a kid, and I want to create that sort of experience for other players, right? So what matters is actually what people do. And then I thought it was a fun idea to talk about some of the design based on what people actually did. So I grabbed some data from actually live gameplay from lots of people. I think these ones is like a year of gameplay or something like that in just this one level. And this is basically a heat for player positions, so we can get a feeling for what people sort of spent the most time and which sort of paths they took. They start down here, so we can see a lot of people go here, probably see this guy. A lot of people go in here. This is like a loot tent where you can get some loot. Some guys go here, which is interesting. Here's a pickup, I think. So this is not super great. This is not really... I guess it makes sense because there's going to be 2 guys up here, so some guys will go over here, also sometimes in fights probably. However, I want to highlight a thing that where I actually used the data during development to change the design. And that's basically, I really wanted the players to go here, because then you see the truck drop off the guys, they could tag all the guys. It felt pretty cool to go here. Everyone went into this building. I closed all the doors, everyone went in here. And it was a horrible experience just standing inside a building with all the closed doors, and then you have all the cool stuff happening outside. So I was like, I tried it another time. I tried to see if I could do it. I couldn't do it. So instead, I opened this door, and you can see people see they go through the open door, they don't open the one that's not open. And then I made it so when you go up here, I open these two doors, and you get a really good little view on these two guys up here. So sometimes like that, you just see people just do this. Then you either say like, okay, I have to stop it, or you go with it and you actually make the experience better based on what the behavior people already have. Here I just sort of remove the low heat, so you get like a better sense of these are like the absolute key hotspots where people go. Again, I don't think it's very good for people running inside this little shed. It's very horrible to be inside. It's not very good. However, this is pretty cool. You look around the corner. This is cool. All that stuff makes sense. I like to turn off the geometry and just really study these kind of paths in detail. I'll get back to that later, but I really like just stuff like this. You have a building here, right? Just see how people sort of go through it. Maybe they were looking out the window there. All those kind of things. It's really interesting for a level designer. Here I did a funny one. Basically, this is a heat of NPCs or AIs that got killed while they were investigating. And it was by the player who was crouching and with a shovel. So it's very specific. Basically, the scenario where an AI is like, huh, I heard something. And then the player is crouching with a shovel, which is basically the ideal thing, basically the thing you just got taught and the weapon you just got given. And then you can see, obviously, a lot of people, this is kind of surprising to me. I wouldn't even have thought of this. But a lot of people somehow managed to get this guy alerted and then, basically go down here because he got, the player somehow did it from down here. And so that's interesting. Obviously, the same thing happens from this angle down there, and you can see other things like that. Where, again, these are all showing where people actually, killed the guy. So it's also quite interesting to see this one. I don't know what's going on there. This one is pretty bad. I'll show you why. So this is the area I was talking about, the second one, where we have the two guys up here, basically, and two guys up here, two here, and the area we just looked at was just below. All this stuff is outside, and again, this is horrible. This is not where I want the player to be. This is horrible. At one point, we played many times around with this. It's a classic thing. Let's put lights there, because light's dangerous when it's stealth, right? People like to go to the light, right? Oh, let's make it dark. And people like to go to the dark because it's good when it's stealth, right? Put a guy out here. Oh, guy, that means it's dangerous, right? No, people just want to kill him, right? So it's kind of like it's a classic thing. If you put a guy there, it's good to stealth. If you don't put a guy there, it's good to stealth that way. Then people just go this way. If you put a guy there, people want to kill him. So it's always like something that wants people to go there. So basically, this is all blocked off. All this stuff is really bad. It's really clearly that you shouldn't go there. But anyway, people still do it. The main thing you can see here, I put these guys in very specific positions. So basically, you go up here, you see this guy, then you kill him. Then from here, you can see this guy up here who is on a path up here. You go around, kill these guys, you see him, and then you go from here, you can see, it's a little path of when you take this guy down, then maybe you see another one that, sort of that kind of it's kind of like freedom, but this is how we direct, right? We don't want to direct people with the objectives. We want to direct people with the enemy position, stuff like that. I thought it was really cool to go through here, so I'm happy to see a lot of people went there. I think I have to go forward a little bit. Here's just an example. This is deaths, where basically the red ones are deaths that are sort of weird ones, that are not so here people that died from the campfire. There's quite a lot of people that just go into the campfire and die, which is surprising. People just go here in outside of the zone, and this one is a really bad one. I'll show you close up. This is really bad, and this is because people will go up here. You saw a lot of people go up here, kill a guy here, go up here, sneak here. Actually, their objective is to go up here, right? But I set up that little challenge of two guys here, so they're like, no, I need to go up here. So they just try, even though it's put all the barbed wire I could. They still try to do it, and they get killed. But this is definitely my fault. So this is it's sort of the weakness of just trying to go somewhere. I'll just quickly walk you through the rest. Here we'll go through the trenches. I'm happy to see that basically there's a good distribution of people. Obviously, I put some cool little setup here, the little drunk guy. We have a cooler conversation here in the middle and that kind of stuff. So basically, it looks pretty decent. Here you can see, people are pretty predictable in no man's land. But that's good. Go here, this is where you pick up your friend, and you carry your friend, and you can obviously, okay, so most people definitely go this way, which is also what I kind of wanted, so that's good. and then most people went this way, and then here, but also here. So stuff like that, just interesting stuff. Here you go and you carry in the light gameplay, and you can see most people actually go here, and then they go this way or this way, and again it's kind of like from this tank to that tank to that tank, and then at the end a lot of people actually go this way, which is kind of cool. So let's go and talk a little bit about multiplayer. This is the map I worked on, which is called Stockholm. I worked on this one also with Pavel Novak and also another guy that some of you guys might know called Jonas Mattsson, Swedish guy who used to work here as well. So for multiplayer, I'm not going to go so much in detail. We also don't have time for it anyway. But I just want to highlight how different multiplayer is to single player. Single player is this kind of directed thing. You know, we want to direct players, but not by sort of telling them what to do. But still, we want to direct them a little bit, right? We want to point them towards the cool things. For multiplayer, it's all about opinions, a balance, and you know, playing the map again and again and again. So all this kind of stuff that, you know, in single player and a player doesn't know where to go, that's really horrible, right? Multiplayer, that's how you feel every time you play a map for the first time. And it's almost like we don't really need to worry too much about it because, you know, people just play them 10 times and then they know it, right? So it's more about, okay, then after you've played the map 10 times, how fun is it? And how balanced is it? And what kind of experiences does it bring? So here I just made some examples of sort of a lot of the sort of relevant things in regards to a group. Like this is kind of like level design stuff that we do mostly, and then some core stuff, some sort of game mode and sort of systems specific to the sort of that kind of stuff. Then we have some other kind of progression and persistent stuff. So for instance, yeah, spawns. Well, it's a lot of things that can cause that, right? Or some classes useless. Again, it's the same thing. It can be like, you know, oh yeah, by the way, for this class you don't get the cool weapon. Or maybe it's like, well, maybe it's core that just makes it useless. Maybe it's because the behemoth, I can kill the behemoth with this class. Or maybe it's like destruction, there's no cover. Or maybe it's, you know, it's all super connected. Airplanes are too powerful, the same thing. It's like one example from Soissons that I worked on, which is basically people got completely destroyed by planes. And basically, when I started making the level, AA guns were super powerful. So I really made the AA gun sort of in pretty exposed positions to sort of like, you know, offset that a little bit. But then we also tweaked the airplane balance. And those two things, and I had some small capture areas, just was bad. Again, it's not because of any of the sort of individual changes are bad, but totally it can really change the perception. And for single player, you're the level designer, you do the level, you play it, and that's how it's going to be, right? Because it's a single player, it's a controlled environment. Multiplayer is so much more complex. Same, too much grenade spam. Again, add some more stuff that people recently have talked about, netcode. A lot of other players are like, well, this map sucks because the team doesn't do what they're supposed to. Well, you know, is that something level designers should change? Maybe not. That's like, for instance, in Soissons as well, was like, oh, well, when people don't pick the AA truck, we cannot kill the airplanes. Well, yeah, that's how it is. And then we have and the whole overview of the game modes. This is just to describe to you how different the level design and also the sort of the restrictions you get, a little bit like we had with the war story. So do we have with the multiplayer stuff, where our two biggest modes are Conquest and Operations. I just made this thing. So they're the big modes. They're the 64-player modes. And then you look at the linearity. Operations is very linear. Conquest is kind of not, at least in regards to objective structure and stuff like it. You can take any and at any time and all that kind of stuff. And then we have the smaller modes down here, and we have the new mode here. But again, it's changed quite a lot, right? When we have like, you know, so we need to have this like very small mode that's linear, and we also need to have this big mode that's not linear, and also we need the small ones that are actually also not linear. And then, you know, it gets difficult since we kind of always do one map and then we have all the modes, right? Yeah, and this is obviously a complaint from the community. A lot of people say, oh, all the maps are too linear in Conquest, which, to be fair, I agree with on some maps, because you never get to see more than those contested flags in the middle of the map, because, you know, you can't flank, you can't go. So that's something that we try to address. And then people said there was too much running around, so it's never easy, right? So let me just walk you quickly through some of the thoughts and stuff for this level. So basically, we started with like, okay, we're gonna make the biggest tank battle. That's basically what that's sort of like the vision to begin with when I even joined it. And this is like art stuff. We had to have rolling hills because that was the visuals we wanted, and it had to like this unspoiled countryside. And I was totally down with this. This is awesome. This is what is great. So we have this totally unspoiled thing, and then you play it, and then everything is destroyed, and you feel bad about it or whatever. And obviously it had to be near Stockholm because it was a part of this mine operation, and it had to be beautiful. Some of the things I really wanted to do, and it was like get distinct areas. I didn't want like farm 3, farm 5, farm 8, farm 10, or random area 1, 2, 3. I wanted these like specific things, and I'll show them in the next slide. We went on this epic tank operation, so we went with 6 tanks against 1, which is like what we thought was good. I'm super happy with it, how it plays now. It's favored towards the attackers as it should be because it's a two map operation. So that's pretty cool. But then in Conquest, I really want infantry. I actually prefer infantry. So for Conquest, I wanted it to be valid for both. I didn't want these dead flags at the end that basically never get contested by the other team. And yeah, we didn't want to do 100% linear. And we also had the new tank behemoth. So yeah, this was basically the pitch on the website, but I'll skip it now. So here we have a map. It's quite small actually, which was actually intended. It used to be bigger, but we didn't think it worked. I will now show you a quick overview, and then I'll just show you how it works. So basically, we have the watermill here, we have a village, we have the trench in the middle, ruins, and then we have the chateau in the middle. So yeah, that looks very linear, right? Yeah, that sucks, right? No. Well, the thing is, I put the spawns from the side. So basically, you have this one is a little bit closer, and this one's a bit closer to here. But these 3 are all the same distance. So you basically have this kind of front line in the middle, which is really a little bit special. I don't think we have this layout on any of the other maps. But it also meant that actually spawning at your HQ is actually a valid thing, and I really like that, and that's why we made it small. The first thing after release, the first time I got contacted online, someone said, "Oh, why didn't you use this as a flag and this as a flag, and then have the spawns here and here, and why didn't ruins put here?" Well, that's how we had it to begin with, and it was not very fun because it was too far. So it's not, it seems like a good idea, but we tried and it didn't work. Here, I'll just show you, just so you can get a sense for the different spaces, like one of the main things I wanted to push for. Have the ruins. People know that they're the ruins when they're the ruins. If you're the chateau, you probably know it. From the other side, and this is the spawn point. But then you have the trench here and the village here. You continue over here, and you can see we have the chateau, the ruins, then we have the village here, and then we have the watermill here. So they're kind of, these kind of spaces feel different, and that's some of the things I'm pretty happy about what we did, because a lot of people comment on that. It definitely feels different when you're fighting around here than fighting on top of the ruins or you're fighting inside the chateau. So that is really something I'm happy about, and that's what I really think you should do in most multiplayer maps. You shouldn't have everything just look the same. For operations, which is the other one, a very big game mode, we had this sector. We actually had another sector up here with sort of like the last stand thing. The attackers start with 6 tanks and basically just destroy the defenders in the first sector most of the time. But that's fine, because that was sort of the thing we wanted to push for. That's what we wanted to do. We didn't want to just do another, it's just another map with some whatever. This is like, this is a 6 tanks against 1. This is a little bit of a unique experience. And then we changed it later. I changed the tank spawns from up here to actually down here. And basically, telemetry also shows for this one that basically attackers lose once on this on average, which is perfect for me. And so basically it's one of those things, you're probably not going to win here, probably not going to win here, probably not going to win here. You might win here, and it's an absolute epic fight here at the end, which is what we're basically going for. These are the 2 other areas that we added for operations. So let me just really quickly, we're running out of time, sorry for that, 5 minutes. Some of the feedback I got, bad spawns. Some of the stuff was bad, and some of the stuff was my fault for sure. We tweaked it in the spring update. Airplanes too dominant, fixed it. Both the balance got fixed, and also I tweaked it in the level. Capture area is too small. Yeah, I had an idea of why I wanted it. I didn't want people to stay up there and snipe with tanks and still cap. But it wasn't really a great idea in the end, so I changed that. Too many tanks. Operations didn't change it. I think it's perfect, and it looks perfect in telemetry. So we didn't change that at all. Too small, didn't change it because I already tried it. Map balance, the flags, no change. I think it works fine as well. Again, also based on telemetry. And this is something that I use a lot, and a lot of the guys that we started trying to use a bit more. And that is like here, for instance, this just shows, right? It's one spawn, another spawn, and colored by team. And basically, I just wanted these 3 flags to be even, right? So when we start, we sort of have an even starting ground. I know that you can actually run faster. At least when I tried, you can run really fast from here to there. But it's not really something people do. So I was a bit surprised that actually these guys got there before these other guys. But it looks, this is how it basically looked throughout, that this is kind of half-half of these guys. Blue get this one, and the red team got this one. So it's okay. This is when people died at this ruin spot. It's very horrible. I played many times my map, of course, and it was horrible. So basically just want to end with this whole thing of going back to what I talked about, that we make games for the players. And this is what I started with. However, today we're probably more closer to something like this, where we have many ways of interacting with our players. We have, all these channels. I interact with people on Twitter and on Facebook and on Discord and on Reddit. We talk to players. People, complain about stuff. They interact with the developers, and we change stuff based on it. Sometimes we hire people from there. Sometimes, we have the game changers that come in, and the YouTubers, and we work with those guys about their opinion about, because they represent their own community, right? And they can help us make games that are better. And this is really interesting, and I actually really enjoy talking to the people as the game is live, because then, they can hear that you're actually listening, and you can talk about stuff, and then obviously you really need to filter stuff. It's not like on single player, you do a UXR playtest. Everyone loved it. You're like, okay, you know what, I'm probably not going to change it. Here, everyone's going to hate it, and everyone's going to love it. So, if you did what everyone told you, you just end up doing nothing, right? Because they say everything, like, oh, I hate it, oh, I love it, all the time. Worst map, best map. So I think this is a really interesting thing we're moving towards, and something like, also I work on Battlefront 2 now. I think we have some really cool stuff coming out there, so I'm super excited about that. Again, just like my main message is like, focus on the players, and sometimes your ego is not, that's really not what, what the players really care about, and also it shouldn't really be what you care about. And I finished with this last picture just because it's kind of it's inside the chateau of how people walk around there. And what I just want to convey is basically it's about the players, right? Every single one of these small dots is one person, right? This is probably like, I don't know, thousands and thousands of hours of gameplay. And remember, every single one of these dots had a completely different experience, right? This is an objective point, this whole point. When you're in here, you're capping or you're defending, right? You're probably not standing inside when you're not doing anything. That makes no sense. So all of these guys, maybe this is a tank. Maybe this guy's waiting in here just capping, just trying to win the game. Maybe these guys are like, playing together in a squad. Every single dot is a player, and there's so many people with different stories. And from a level design point of view, what we do, we look at these paths, we see how, they're doing what we wanted. I remember all the old layouts we had, and like, oh, is this good? Is this bad? And then you think about what are people doing there, giving all the sort of mechanics in the game, and all that kind of imagination of what people are doing and thinking. And that's basically what level design is about, right? Is thinking about how are people going to play this, and how can we make that the best experience possible. And that's why I think such a boring picture, it's still kind of a nice way to end it, because this is what it's all about. It's about how people play your level. It's not really about the art or the design or whatever. It's actually just about how much fun these guys are having, and that's what we're here for. So I ran over the time, sorry about that, 4 minutes. Grab me outside if you have any questions. I will be happy to answer anything. And that's it. Thank you.